I'm going to start creating a CD layout inside of Photoshop and making it 3D into Maya. We'll begin by starting out in Photoshop. Begin by creating a template that's the size of a page from the CD booklet, and then we'll bring it into Maya and use it as a free image plane. In Maya, I'll hold down my spacebar, I'll go to Create Free Image Plane. I'll go to the attributes for the free image plane, and I'll introduce the template. Moving it back in the perspective view, I'll go to my orthographic front view, put it on the XY axes and scale it down a bit. And then in the channel box, I'll put it on its own layer, and I will make sure that I've got R selected to restrict it. Now I'll go to Create, Polygon Primitive Plane. I'll create a plane of portions of the template, and then in the channel box I'll make the subdivision width 12, and that's going to give me some planes on which to bend the surface so it looks like a page. Now once I've done that, I'll go to my perspective view. Now before I actually start to bend this though, I'm going to delete the history and I'm going to freeze the transforms, because it's best to apply a texture before we start to play with our geometry. In this instance, we're going to bend it. So that will keep the texture proportional to the geometry, even though it is bent. Now, once I've done that, I'll go to UV, Planar, Options, and I'll choose the Z-axis and hit Apply. And then in the channel box on the right, I'll make sure the projection width and height are the same number, and I'll return to my object mode. Now I'll go to Deform, Nonlinear, and Bend. It'll introduce a white vertical line. Now I'll hit T on the keyboard, and T will allow me to sub-edit that feature we just introduced. If I were to click and drag on the diamond shape in the middle, you can see it's bending it, and it's not in the direction I want. This tool should start out horizontally. So I'll Z it out. I'll hit W to return to the white line setting, and I'll hit E to rotate. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees on my Z axis. And you can see as you're doing this in your channel box, you can go ahead and you can set that to the 90 to get it specifically the way you'll need it, because it wouldn't have these pages side by side. Now I'm going to hit T on the keyboard again, and if I pull on that shape again, I can see it's bending, but it's still not going in the right direction. I'll hit E on the keyboard, and if I start to rotate the green Y-axis back, you can see it's starting to bend it in the right direction, as if it were laying down on the ground or on a tabletop and bending just a little bit. Now once again, I'm going to play with that dial, and then I'm going to set the specific Y-axis, in this instance to -90. And it's going to give me that bend going back. So that's how I would control the amount of bend I put on this. Now that I have it bent the way I want, I'm going to delete the history and freeze the transforms, because now that I have one the way I want, I can duplicate as many of these as I want, putting a separate texture on. In this case, maybe we'll do one full page on a UV map by itself, keep the resolution kind of decent. And now I can apply my material. What I'll do is I'll shift select and I'll assign a new material, Arnold AI Standard Surface, and I'll name it according to the page it might be. And now we're going to go to the UV editor. In the UV editor, I'll select the UV shell. I'll pull this one out here for now. I'll return to my object mode, because now if I shift select, I can see I have both of these here. So at this point, what I could do is put these right next to each other, and then I'll shift select both, and I have to scale them to fit inside the UV designated area in Photoshop. So this would be that whole page that we'll see in a moment once we take that into Photoshop. Now because I'm in my object mode, I can now go to Image, UV Snapshot, and I'll browse to my folder, and again I name it appropriately, and I'll apply and close. Now I'll jump to Photoshop and put the textures on. I've opened up my PNG with the two-page layout and the texture in Photoshop, so I'll copy and paste the texture in Photoshop into the PNG. I'll put it underneath the UV map and scale it to fit. And as a safety precaution, I'm going to put a new layer in. I'll put it below the image, and I'll sample the background color, hitting Option Delete. I'll turn off the UV map and I'll save it. And now we'll bring it into Maya. In Maya, I'll select either one of the planes, right-click and choose Material Attribute. And clicking on the Color tab, I'll introduce my texture. Hit 6 on the keyboard, and now you can see what we've got. Now, if I needed to rotate these individually, I could always put the pivot by holding D and V. I can snap it to the very edge here. I'll go to my top view, hitting F on the keyboard. I'll do the same from this view, and that would allow me to rotate that if I needed to, so that if there were a page underneath, it wouldn't be on top of it. So I'll go ahead and hit C on the keyboard, and you can see now that if I were to rotate that, it's going to pretty much be rotating from an imaginary spine. So essentially what we could do is we could have these, and I'll go ahead, I'll group this, center the pivot, and then if I were to rotate this down to put it on the ground, I can hold J on the keyboard, and you can see you can start to stack all the pages that you want, and that's how I would do the pages for it. In the next tutorial, we'll add a CD with the texture for it on it as well, and then we'll do the cover.